Professor Click 9 adjusted his 4 optical sensors with what could only be described as existential dread. Another semester, another batch of wide-eyed cadets eager to learn about the galaxy's most dangerous species. The irony wasn't lost on him that he, a peaceful Xanthari with the combat capability of a particularly aggressive houseplant, was tasked with teaching military ethics and xenobiology to the Coalition's finest. "Welcome, cadets, to Advanced Predator Studies," he announced, his translator crackling with static. "Today we begin our comprehensive review of human warfare tactics and, well, let's call them creative problem-solving techniques." Cadet Vex Prime, a towering Goliathan with skin like burnished copper, raised one of his 6 arms. "Professor, why do we need an entire semester on just one species? Surely humans can't be that different from other apex predators?" "Oh, sweet summer child," Click 9 thought, suppressing what his species considered a laugh but sounded more like a dying air filter. "That, Cadet Vex Prime, is precisely why we're here. Computer. Display case study Alpha 7, the Great Emu War." The holographic display flickered to life, showing what appeared to be a pastoral scene on Earth. Rolling hills, scattered settlements, and birds, large, flightless birds. "Now, class, observe carefully. The year is 1932, Earth Standard. The human government of Australia declares war on." Click 9 paused for dramatic effect. "Emus. Cadet Ziltha, a crystalline being from the Prism worlds, vibrated at a frequency that indicated confusion." "Professor, surely there's been a translation error? They declared war on flightless avians?" "Oh, it gets better," Click 9 replied, manipulating the display to show archive footage. "They deployed military personnel, machine guns, and tactical vehicles against birds. The birds won." The classroom erupted in what passed for laughter among 17 different species. Cadet Thorn, the only draconian in the class, let out a sulphurous chuckle that slightly melted his desk. "But Professor," interjected Cadet Yuki, a diminutive felinoid whose translator gave her voice a perpetual purr, "how can an advanced spacefaring species lose to non-sapient creatures?" "Ah, Cadet Yuki, you've stumbled upon the first rule of human warfare," Click 9 said, switching to the next slide. "Never underestimate their ability to overcomplicate simple problems while simultaneously solving impossible ones through sheer bloody-minded persistence." The new display showed a grainy video labeled Operation Overlord, Normandy Landings, 1944. The footage depicted thousands of human soldiers storming beaches under withering fire, their primitive projectile weapons spitting death across the sand. "Notice the tactical coordination," Click 9 narrated, pointing to the organized chaos unfolding on screen. "Multi-pronged assault, air support, naval bombardment, all executed with clockwork precision. This operation involved over 150,000 human soldiers coordinating across multiple theaters of engagement." Cadet Vex Prime's optical organs widened. "The same species that lost to the birds? The very same." Click 9 switched to another recording, this one showing human soldiers in white winter camouflage moving through deep snow. Finland, 1939. A force of 200,000 humans holds off nearly 1 million invaders using tactics that would make a Shadowkin assassin weep with admiration. The footage showed humans emerging from snowbanks like ghosts, striking swiftly and vanishing back into the frozen landscape. Their faces, barely visible beneath layers of protective gear, showed a calm determination that sent shivers through several heat-sensitive species in the classroom. "They call this particular human Simoheha," Click 9 said, zooming in on a figure barely visible in the tree line. "Estimated 500 confirmed eliminations using primitive ballistic weapons in temperatures that would freeze most of our atmospheres solid." Cadet Thorn's thermal sensors flickered. That's impossible." "One individual? Oh, we're just getting started." The professor's voice took on what humans might recognize as glee, though filtered through a Xanthari throat. It sounded more like grinding gears. "Computer, display the Pacific Theater compilation." The hologram shifted to show naval battles across vast oceanic expanses. Massive metal constructs hurled explosive projectiles at each other, while smaller craft weaved between them like angry insects. The humans fought simultaneously across multiple planetary water bodies, Click 9 explained, highlighting different battle zones on a global map, while also maintaining land campaigns on 4 continents. Their logistics network spanned half their planet. A new cadet spoke up from the back row. He was human-sized, though his environmental suit made species identification impossible. "Professor, what about their treatment of prisoners? Surely there are protocols." Click 9's optical sensors focused on the newcomer with interest. Something about the voice seemed familiar, though the translator made identification difficult. "Ah, yes. An excellent question, Cadet. I don't seem to have your identification, Marcus," the figure replied simply. "Marcus Webb. Well, Cadet Webb, human treatment of prisoners is complex." The display shifted to show what appeared to be a massive facility behind barbed wire. The Geneva Conventions, established in 1949, created the foundation for what most civilized species consider basic decency in warfare. The footage showed human medical personnel treating wounded soldiers regardless of their uniform colors. Remarkable, really. In the midst of total warfare, they developed protocols for minimizing suffering. Cadet Ziltha vibrated again. "But surely these are isolated incidents, not representative of their typical behavior?" Click 9's expression would have been unreadable to most species, but those familiar with Xanthari facial patterns might have detected something resembling dark amusement. "Computer, display the Baton Death March footage." The cheerful atmosphere in the classroom evaporated like atmosphere from a breached hull. The grainy footage showed thousands of human prisoners being force-marched across brutal terrain. They were falling, unable to continue. "Not all humans followed these protocols," Click 9 said quietly. "The capacity for both mercy and cruelty exists simultaneously in their species. It makes them unpredictable." He switched to another recording. "The Liberation of Concentration Camps, 1945. Warning: the following footage contains disturbing content. The images that followed were difficult for many species to process. Humans reduced to skeletal frames, industrial-scale extermination facilities, and the faces of the human soldiers who discovered them. Those faces showed something that transcended species barriers, a universal expression of horror and rage. The liberating forces," Click 9 continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "had to be restrained from executing the guards on site. Their emotional response to discovering systematic atrocities was intense." Cadet Webb had gone very still in his seat. Even through the environmental suit, tension was visible in his posture. "But here's what makes humans truly dangerous," the professor continued, oblivious to the change in atmosphere. "They learn." "Computer, display Korean conflict medical advances." The screen showed human medics working frantically on wounded soldiers in what appeared to be mobile surgical units and MASH units. Mobile Army Surgical Hospitals. They revolutionized battlefield medicine during this conflict. The same species that created industrial death camps, Click 9 explained, also developed techniques that have saved millions of lives across the galaxy. Human medical innovations from their wars formed the backbone of coalition emergency medicine. Cadet Yuki's tail was twitching, a sign of agitation in her species. "Professor, this is confusing. Are humans naturally violent or naturally healing?" "Both. Neither. That's what makes them so fascinating and terrifying." Click 9 brought up a new display showing what appeared to be a jungle environment. Vietnam conflict, 1955 to 1975. Earth Standard. Watch how they adapt. The footage showed human soldiers moving through dense tropical vegetation. Their equipment had evolved, their tactics had changed, but their faces still held that same grim determination. "Notice the technological integration," Click 9 pointed out. "Helicopter insertion, chemical defoliants, electronic surveillance. They weaponized their entire industrial base." A clip showed massive aircraft dropping what looked like rain over vast stretches of jungle. The vegetation below began to wither and die. Agent Orange, Click 9 explained. Designed to deny cover to enemy forces. Effective, but with long-term environmental and health consequences they didn't fully understand at the time. Cadet Webb's hands had clenched into fists inside his environmental suit. The interesting part, the professor continued, seemingly oblivious to the rising tension, is how human public opinion turned against their own military leadership during this conflict. Anti-war protests, draft resistance, media coverage bringing battlefield imagery into civilian homes. The display showed crowds of humans carrying signs, facing lines of armed soldiers. Some of the protesters appeared to be placing flowers in the barrels of weapons, a species that wages war. Click 9 mused, but also protests against war. Fascinating contradiction. Perhaps, Cadet Webb said, his voice carefully controlled. They learned that some wars aren't worth fighting. An excellent observation. Cadet Webb, indeed, human attitudes toward warfare have evolved considerably. The professor switched to more recent footage. The Gulf conflicts of the late 20th and early 21st centuries show remarkable restraint compared to earlier periods. The new recordings showed what looked like precision strikes, careful target selection, and extensive efforts to minimize civilian casualties. Human soldiers were seen providing medical aid to enemy combatants and distributing supplies to non-combatants. Rules of engagement became increasingly restrictive, Click 9 explained. Human military doctrine evolved to prioritize mission success with minimal collateral damage. Cadet Thorne's heat sensors were picking up elevated temperatures from several students. Professor, you mentioned they're dangerous because they learn. What exactly did they learn? Click 9's optical sensors gleamed with what passed for enthusiasm among his species. That, Cadet Thorne, brings us to the truly terrifying part. Computer, display Coalition First Contact protocols. The screen shifted to show sleek spacecraft bearing the insignia of the Galactic Coalition. Human figures in advanced environmental suits were visible working alongside various alien species. When humans achieved faster-than-light travel and made contact with the Coalition, Click 9 explained, their first request wasn't for advanced weapons or territorial expansion. They asked for our medical databases. The footage showed human scientists working intensively in what appeared to be massive research facilities, collaborating with beings from dozens of different species. They wanted to cure diseases. The professor continued, it's not just human diseases, but ailments affecting every species they encountered. Their second request was for agricultural techniques to end hunger on their homeworld. Cadet Ziltha's harmonic frequency shifted to indicate surprise. That's not what we expected from an apex predator species. No, it's not. Click 9's tone became almost philosophical. But here's what makes them truly dangerous to any potential enemy. Computer, display the Terran Defense Initiative. The hologram showed massive space-based installations surrounding Earth's solar system. The architecture was unmistakably human, but incorporated technology from across the galaxy. Within 50 standard years of first contact, Click 9 said, humans had integrated Coalition technology with their own innovations to create defensive systems that would give pause to any aggressive species. The display zoomed in on one of the installations. Its design was elegant but clearly functional, bristling with both energy-based and kinetic weapons systems. They militarized their entire solar system, the professor continued, while simultaneously establishing medical research stations, agricultural colonies, and educational exchanges with over 200 Coalition species. Cadet Webb had unusually quiet during this portion of the lecture. When he finally spoke, his voice held a strange quality. Professor, you speak of humans as if they're not in the room. The classroom went silent. Several species with enhanced sensory capabilities suddenly turned toward the mysterious cadet. Click 9's optical sensors focused intently on the environmental suit. Cadet Webb, your personnel file indicates you're from the Tau Ceti system, a colony world. That's correct, Professor. A human colony world. The silence stretched until it became almost unbearable. Cadet Yuki's ears were flat against her head, a sure sign of anxiety. Well then, Click 9 said finally, his voice carefully neutral. Perhaps you could provide some first-hand perspective on human colonial policies. Marcus Webb reached up and disengaged the seals on his environmental helmet. The face that emerged was unmistakably human, middle-aged, with graying hair and eyes that had seen too much. "I could," he said, his unfiltered voice carrying clearly across the suddenly tense classroom. "But I think it might be more educational to continue with your footage, Professor. I noticed you have quite an extensive collection." Click 9's optical sensors cycled through several different spectrums, as if trying to process this development. "Indeed. Computer, display the next segment in our curriculum." The hologram shifted to show what appeared to be a space-based conflict. Sleek coalition vessels were engaged in combat with something that looked like it had been assembled from scrap metal and powered by sheer determination. "The hegemony incursion of 2387, Click 9 announced, though his voice lacked its earlier enthusiasm. A previously unknown species attempted to establish dominance over 3 coalition border systems. The footage showed brutal efficiency as the unknown attackers overwhelmed coalition defensive positions. Their tactics were ruthless, showing no consideration for civilian populations or military conventions. The Coalition Military Council was struggling to formulate an appropriate response. The professor continued diplomatically. "Our species tend toward measured, consensus-based decision-making. In the recording, coalition ships were retreating in organized formations, clearly outmatched by their opponents' willingness to sacrifice everything for tactical advantage." It was at this point, Click 9 said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper, that the Terran Defense Force volunteered to assist. The hologram suddenly filled with new ships. The human vessels were smaller than their coalition counterparts but moved with predatory grace. Their attack patterns were unlike anything in standard military doctrine. "Notice the unconventional approach vectors," the professor pointed out, though his usual academic detachment was slipping. Human tactical doctrine doesn't prioritize preservation of equipment or even personnel survival. The human ships were diving directly into enemy formations, weapons blazing. Where coalition vessels focused on long-range engagements and tactical withdrawals, the humans were closing to point-blank range. The hegemony forces had never encountered an enemy willing to ram damaged vessels directly into their capital ships, Click 9 continued, his optical sensors fixated on the display. The footage showed exactly that, a human destroyer, its hull breached and atmosphere venting, accelerating directly toward a massive enemy dreadnought. The collision was spectacular and devastating. "Effective," Cadet Thorne observed, his thermal readings spiking. "But surely unsustainable?" "You would think so," the professor replied. "But humans have this disturbing tendency to treat impossible odds as a personal challenge rather than a tactical limitation." The recording continued, showing human forces executing maneuvers that violated several fundamental principles of space warfare. They were using asteroid fields as cover, rigging explosive charges on derelict vessels to create improvised mines, and coordinating attacks with a precision that suggested extensive experience with desperate situations. The conflict lasted 18 standard days, Click 9 reported. The hegemony forces, despite superior numbers and technology, requested terms of surrender on day 19. Cadet Webb had been watching the footage with an expression that might have been recognition. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that silenced the room. "Professor, I notice your footage includes quite detailed recordings of human tactical operations. Where exactly did the Coalition obtain such comprehensive battle data?" Click 9's optical sensors cycled again, and for the first time since the lecture began, he seemed uncertain. "The Terran Defense Force provided full documentation for training purposes." "How thoughtful of them," Webb replied, and there was something in his tone that made several students shift uncomfortably in their seats. The professor seemed to gather himself. "Computer, display the final segment for today's lesson." The hologram showed what appeared to be a ceremony. Human military personnel were standing in formation while coalition officials presented various awards and commendations. The humans were honored for their service to the coalition, Click 9 explained. Their tactics were effective if unconventional and terrifying, added Cadet Vex Prime. No offense, Cadet Webb. Marcus Webb turned to look at the towering Goliathan. None taken. But I'm curious, Professor. You've shown us extensive footage of human warfare throughout their history, but I haven't seen much about their peacekeeping operations. An excellent point, Click 9 replied, though something in his posture suggested he would rather not pursue this line of discussion. Computer, display the Centauri relief operation. The new footage showed human vessels in a system that appeared to be in chaos. Multiple space stations were visible, many showing signs of significant damage. Civil war in the Centauri system, the professor explained. 3 separate factions, each claiming legitimate authority. Civilian casualties were mounting exponentially. The human ships were moving between the combatants, but instead of engaging either side, they were evacuating civilian populations from damaged installations. The humans established neutral zones, Click 9 continued, using their ships as mobile hospitals and refugee centers. They managed to extract over 2 million non-combatants while simultaneously negotiating ceasefire agreements. Cadet Yuki's tail had stopped twitching. They stopped a war without fighting? More accurately, Webb interjected, they made it clear that anyone who targeted civilians would have to answer to them personally. The fighting stopped because both sides realized they didn't want that conversation. The classroom was very quiet now. The implications of having an actual human present during a lecture about human warfare were beginning to sink in across multiple species. Professor Click 9 cleared his throat, a sound that emerged from his translator as static feedback. Well, class, that brings us to the end of today's session. Tomorrow we'll be reviewing human diplomatic protocols and their unique approach to conflict resolution. As students began gathering their materials, Cadet Webb remained seated. When most of the others had filed out, he stood and approached the professor's desk. Interesting curriculum, Professor, he said conversationally. I particularly enjoyed the section on the hegemony incursion. Very detailed footage. Click 9's optical sensors focused on the human with what might have been nervousness. The Coalition archives are quite comprehensive. Indeed they are. Webb agreed. I'm looking forward to tomorrow's lesson. I have a feeling it's going to be very educational. As the human turned to leave, the professor called after him. Cadet Webb? Out of curiosity, what brings you to our Advanced Predator Studies course? Marcus Webb paused at the doorway and looked back. His smile was perfectly pleasant and absolutely terrifying. Professional development. Professor, you never know when old skills might become relevant again. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving Professor Click 9 alone with his thoughts and the unsettling realization that tomorrow's lesson on human diplomacy was going to be very interesting indeed. Professor Click 9 arrived at his classroom the next morning with what could generously be described as apprehension. He had spent most of the night reviewing his lesson plan, cross-referencing his video archives, and experiencing what humans might call cold feet. The presence of Cadet Webb had transformed his comfortable academic exercise into something far more precarious. The students filed in with their usual chatter, though several kept glancing toward the back row where Marcus Webb had sat the previous day. The human arrived precisely on time, his environmental suit sealed and his demeanor as unreadable as before. Good morning, class, Click 9 began, his optical sensors carefully avoiding direct contact with Webb. Today we examine human diplomatic protocols and their approach to interspecies relations. Cadet Vex Prime raised an arm. Professor, after yesterday's lesson, I'm curious how a species with such aggressive tendencies manages peaceful negotiations. An excellent question, Click 9 replied. Activating the holographic display. Computer, show the first contact protocols, Luna Conference, 2341. The projection displayed what appeared to be a massive conference facility on Earth's moon, and representatives from dozens of species were visible, seated around elaborate tables designed to accommodate various physiological requirements. The humans insisted on hosting the initial diplomatic summit, the professor explained. They converted their lunar industrial facilities into the galaxy's most sophisticated multilingual conference center in just 6 months. The footage showed human technicians working alongside coalition engineers, installing translation matrices and environmental controls that could support everything from methane-breathing sulfurians to the crystalline harmonics who communicated through resonant frequencies. It noticed the attention to cultural details, Click 9 pointed out, highlighting sections of the facility, prayer spaces for 17 different belief systems, food preparation areas for 43 distinct dietary requirements, and medical bays equipped to handle 38 different biochemistries. Cadet Ziltha vibrated at her confused frequency. This seems unnecessarily elaborate for what should be straightforward negotiations. That's where human psychology becomes interesting, the professor replied. They appear to believe that comfortable guests make better negotiating partners. Computer, display the trade agreement negotiations. The scene shifted to show what looked more like a festival than a diplomatic conference. Human representatives were mingling with their alien counterparts in informal settings, sharing food and participating in various cultural exchanges. The humans introduced what they called diplomatic hospitality, Click 9 explained. Instead of formal negotiating sessions, they organized cultural exchange programs, joint recreational activities, and collaborative problem-solving exercises. The footage showed a human diplomat engaged in what appeared to be a complex board game with a six-armed hegemony representative. Both were laughing, or producing their species' equivalent of laughter. The result, the professor continued, was the Lunar Accords, the most comprehensive trade agreement in coalition history, signed after 3 weeks of what the humans termed getting to know each other. Cadet Thorne's thermal sensors flickered. They turned diplomacy into a social gathering? More accurately, Webb interjected from the back row. They recognized that most conflicts stem from misunderstanding and fear of the unknown. Hard to fear someone after you've shared a meal and learned about their family. The classroom turned to focus on the human, and Click 9 felt his academic comfort zone dissolving entirely. Indeed, Cadet Webb, the professor managed. The human approach to diplomacy emphasizes personal relationships over institutional protocols. Speaking from experience, Professor? Webb asked, and there was definitely something predatory in his tone now. Click 9's optical sensors cycled rapidly. Computer, display the mediation protocols, Rigel sector dispute. The hologram showed 2 fleets of warships facing each other across empty space. The tension was palpable even through the recording medium. The Aquatic Coalition and the Silicon Confederacy had been engaged in territorial disputes for over 2 centuries, Click 9 explained, grateful to return to safer academic ground. Multiple coalition mediation attempts had failed. The footage showed a single human vessel approaching the standoff zone. It was smaller than most of the warships present and appeared to be unarmed. The humans volunteered to mediate. The professor continued. Their approach was unconventional. The recording shifted to show the interior of what appeared to be a massive cargo bay that had been converted into a meeting space. Representatives from both species were present, along with human mediators. Instead of addressing the territorial claims directly, Click 9 narrated, the humans focused on the underlying resource needs driving the conflict. The humans in the footage were presenting holographic displays showing alternative resource acquisition methods, trade route optimizations, and joint development proposals. They proposed what they called a win-win scenario, the professor explained. Both species could achieve their objectives through cooperation rather than competition. Cadet Yuki's ears perked up with interest. Did it work? The Rigel Accords established the first permanent interspecies industrial partnership in coalition history, Click 9 replied. Both species achieved resource security while reducing military expenditures by 70%. Clever, Cadet Vex Prime admitted. Turn enemies into business partners. The humans have a saying, Webb commented, it's hard to fight someone you're making money with. The professor was beginning to sweat, which for a Zenthari involved unpleasant chemical secretions. Computer, display the crisis response protocols. The hologram shifted to show what appeared to be a natural disaster. A planet's surface was racked with massive storms and orbital installations were being evacuated. The Kepler 442 system experienced unprecedented solar flare activity, Click 9 explained. 3 inhabited worlds and 47 space installations were at immediate risk. The footage showed coalition emergency response vessels struggling to coordinate evacuation efforts. The scale of the disaster was overwhelming their standard protocols. The Coalition Emergency Council estimated minimum casualty figures at 2 million beings. The professor continued grimly. Then the humans arrived, Webb said quietly, and something in his voice made the entire class turn toward him. The holographic display suddenly filled with human vessels, but these weren't military craft. They were civilian ships, cargo haulers, passenger liners, even private yachts, hundreds of them. Every available human vessel in 3 sectors, Click 9 continued, his voice subdued. Military and civilian, commercial and private. They mobilized their entire merchant marine. The footage showed organized chaos as human ships coordinated with coalition forces to extract beings from the threatened worlds. The humans were taking risks that violated every safety protocol in the book, diving into atmospheric storms and docking with damaged stations that should have been abandoned. They saved 1.7 million beings, the professor reported, lost 43 ships and 312 crew members in the process. The classroom was completely silent now. Even the species that didn't breathe had somehow managed to hold their breath. The coalition offered to compensate the families of the lost crew members. Click 9 continued. The humans declined. They said rescuing people wasn't a commercial transaction. Cadet Thorne's heat readings were fluctuating wildly. They died for strangers? They died for neighbors, Webb corrected, and his voice carried absolute certainty. Professor Click 9 realized he was approaching dangerous territory, but academic integrity demanded he continue. Computer, display the enforcement protocols. The new footage showed human vessels in what appeared to be a combat formation, but they were facing coalition ships, not external enemies. The Corvus incident, Click 9 announced. His optical sensors focused anywhere except on Webb. 2389. Coalition Mining Consortium operations in the Corvus system. The recording showed massive automated mining equipment stripping resources from what appeared to be inhabited worlds. Primitive settlements were visible being systematically destroyed. The indigenous species, while pre-spaceflight, showed clear signs of sapience, the professor explained. Coalition law technically protected them, but enforcement mechanisms were inadequate. The footage showed coalition officials in heated discussion while the mining operations continued. Legal debates and bureaucratic procedures were playing out while an entire civilization was being eradicated. The humans requested immediate cessation of mining operations, Click 9 continued, when diplomatic channels proved insufficient. The hologram showed human ships moving to intercept the mining vessels. What followed was less a battle than a systematic shutdown of industrial operations. They disabled the mining equipment without harming personnel, the professor noted, then established a protective cordon around the inhabited worlds. Cadet Ziltha was vibrating at maximum frequency. They attacked coalition operations? They enforced coalition law, Webb stated flatly, when the proper authorities proved unwilling to do so. The footage shifted to show the aftermath. Coalition officials were meeting with human representatives while, in the background, the indigenous species settlements were being rebuilt with advanced materials and techniques. The humans established a development trust, Click 9 explained, technology transfer programs, educational exchanges, medical assistance, all designed to help the indigenous species develop at their own pace, and the mining consortium. Cadet Vex Prime asked, relocated to uninhabited systems with human assistance. The professor replied, productivity actually increased due to improved efficiency techniques the humans provided. The class was absorbing this information with varying degrees of shock when Webb stood up from his seat. Professor, he said, his voice carrying across the silent classroom, I think it's time we addressed the elephant in the room. Click 9's optical sensors finally focused directly on the human. Cadet Webb. Biffo, Marcus Webb reached up and removed his helmet entirely, setting it on his desk. His gray hair was disheveled, and his eyes held a mixture of amusement and something far more serious. My name is Marcus Webb, he said clearly. Colonel Marcus Webb, Terran Defense Force, retired, and I've been in about half the footage you've shown this class. The silence that followed was so complete it had mass and weight. Several students appeared to have stopped their primary biological functions entirely. The hegemony incursion, Webb continued conversationally. I commanded the destroyer squadron that broke their main battle line. The Centauri relief operation. That was my task force. The Corvus incident? I led the enforcement action. Professor Click-9's optical sensors had locked onto Webb and refused to move. You're him. I'm him, Webb confirmed with a slight smile, and before anyone asks, yes, I volunteered to audit this course. The Coalition Education Ministry thought it would be valuable to get a human perspective on your curriculum. Cadet Yuki's voice came out as barely a whisper. Are you going to kill us? Webb's laughter was genuinely amused, which somehow made it more terrifying. Cadet, if I wanted to harm anyone in this room, would I really need to remove my helmet first? The logic was unassailable and completely unhelpful for anyone's peace of mind. The truth is, Webb continued, moving to the front of the classroom, Professor Click-9 has done an excellent job presenting human military history. Accurate, comprehensive, appropriately analytical. The professor managed to find his voice. Thank you. There's just one thing missing from your presentation, Webb said, activating the holographic controls. Computer, display personal file Webb, Marcus Colonel, service record. The hologram filled with what appeared to be an official military document. Webb's image was visible alongside detailed service records, commendations, and mission reports. You've shown the what and the how, Webb explained, scrolling through the records, but you haven't addressed the why. He stopped at a section labeled Motivational Assessment. The text was dense with psychological evaluations and behavioral analyses. Why do humans fight the way we do? Why do we take risks other species consider suicidal? Why do we enforce laws even when it costs us politically? Webb looked around the classroom, making eye contact with each student. Computer, display the Declaration of Principles, Terran Defense Force. The hologram showed a simple document with surprisingly little text. At the top, in multiple languages including several coalition scripts, was a single sentence. We stand between the darkness and the light, not because we must, but because we choose to. Webb let that sink in before continuing. Every human in military service volunteers. No conscription, no mandatory service, no economic coercion. They choose to risk their lives for people they've never met and may never meet. He manipulated the display to show recruitment centers across human space. Long lines of volunteers, diverse ages and backgrounds, all waiting to enlist. Professor Click-9 showed you the Kepler rescue operation, Webb continued. What he didn't mention is that civilian vessels volunteered faster than military command could coordinate them. We had to turn people away. The hologram shifted to show communication logs from the disaster. The hundreds of messages from civilian captains requesting permission to join the rescue efforts. This is what makes humans dangerous, Webb said, turning to address the class directly. We don't fight because we're ordered to. We don't help because it's profitable. We don't enforce justice because it's convenient. He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of absolute conviction. We do these things because we believe they're right, and that belief makes us willing to pay any price, take any risk, face any enemy. Cadet Thorne's thermal readings had stabilized, but his voice was still uncertain. Colonel Webb, what happens when humans decide someone is wrong? Webb's smile was gentle, but his eyes remained hard as diamonds. That depends entirely on whether they're willing to become right. Professor Click-9 found his voice at last. Colonel, what would you like the class to understand about human nature? Marcus Webb looked around the room one final time, meeting each alien gaze with perfect calm. Is that we're not the monsters you might fear us to be, he said simply. But we're also not the friends you might hope us to be. We're humans. We make our own choices about right and wrong, and we live with the consequences. He picked up his helmet and tucked it under his arm. The galaxy is a big place, with room for everyone who wants to build rather than destroy, who wants to create rather than consume, who wants to protect rather than exploit. As he walked toward the door, He paused and looked back. But for those who choose differently, Webb's smile was perfectly pleasant and absolutely final. Well, you've seen the footage. The door closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the classroom in stunned silence. Finally, Professor Click-9 managed to speak. Class dismissed. Tomorrow we begin our unit on diplomatic philosophy and the ethics of intervention. As the students filed out in unusual quiet, Cadet Yuki paused at the professor's desk. "Professor," she said softly, "are humans really that dangerous?" Click-9's optical sensors focused on the empty doorway where Webb had disappeared. "Cadet Yuki, I believe the more important question is, are we grateful they're on our side?" The Phelinoid's ears twitched once, and she nodded thoughtfully before following her classmates into the corridor. Professor Click-9 remained alone in his classroom, staring at the empty holographic display and wondering if his next lesson should include a section on why it's probably best not to make humans angry. He decided it definitely should.